All right, let's get into it. We talk about the internet all the time, but today we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the hidden, physical world that actually makes it all work. Welcome to our explainer on the internet's secret backbone.
So, let me just ask you this. When you think about the internet, your emails, your Netflix, all your stuff in the cloud, where do you actually picture it all? It just seems to float around in the air, right?
Well, here's a little hint for you. Despite what we call it, it is definitely not in the cloud. That whole idea of a completely wireless world, it's probably one of the biggest myths of our time. The reality is much more solid and, as we'll see, a lot more fragile.
Let's start with just a number. 97%. Just let that sink in for a second. 97% of what?
Get this, 97% of all global data. Every text message, every bank transaction, every single thing you do online travels through a massive network of physical, fiber optic cables stretched across the bottom of the ocean. It's not wireless at all. We live in a world that is literally wired together. And look, this isn't just some neat piece of trivia. This physical network is the absolute lifeblood of our modern civilization, which brings us to the incredibly high stakes resting in these deep, deep waters.
Okay, take a look at this number. $10 trillion. What on earth could possibly be worth that much?
That is the staggering amount of money that pulses through this undersea network. Every single day. Not per year, not per month, every 24 hours. The entire global economy is utterly dependent on these cables staying online.
And this quote from a former top official at the U.S. Federal Reserve just nails the risk. He said a failure in this system isn't some slow-motion problem. It doesn't grind to a halt. No, it snaps to a halt. It's like flipping a switch off for the entire world.
So, you might be thinking, what about satellites? Can't they just take over? The short answer is no, not even close. Satellites handle only a tiny fraction of our data, around 3%. They just don't have the horsepower, the sheer bandwidth for our digital world. We are all in on these undersea cables.
And what's wild is this isn't even new technology. We've been laying cables across oceans for over 160 years. The very first one, way back in 1858, took almost 18 hours just to send a short 100-word message. Today, we're sending millions of movies worth of data in the same amount of time. The scale is just mind-boggling.
I mean, just look at how far the technology has come. From simple copper wires to these incredibly complex bundles of fiber optics. They are absolute marvels of engineering. But here's the catch. For all their sophistication, they can be surprisingly fragile. Once they're out in the deep ocean, many of them are just sitting there on the seabed, exposed. And that vulnerability? Well, it hasn't gone unnoticed. This sprawling, vital, and fragile network has now become what military strategists call a new geopolitical choke point.
So, what's a choke point? Well, think of a narrow shipping lane, like the Suez Canal. If you can control that little strip of water, you can have a massive impact on global trade. These undersea cables are the choke points of the information age. He who controls the cables controls the data.
And because of that, the biggest threat isn't a stray ship anchor or an earthquake anymore. According to the source material we're looking at today, these cables are now being viewed as intentional targets in a new, shadowy kind of global competition.
Now, the source paper we're drawing from outlines how it sees the strategies of different world powers. It describes Russia's approach as a form of hybrid warfare, pointing to spy ships like the Yantar that operate suspiciously close to key cable routes, potentially mapping them for disruption. The paper then contrasts this with China's strategy, which it calls the Digital Silk Road, expanding influence by having Chinese companies like Huawei Marine lay a growing share of the world's cables, giving them a different kind of leverage.
And listen, this isn't some fringe idea. The former head of the entire British military, Stuart Peach, put it about as bluntly as you can. He called this threat, and I'm quoting, a new risk to our way of life. When people at that level are sounding the alarm, you know it's serious. So it's a pretty daunting picture, isn't it? But understanding the risk is always the first step toward fixing the problem. So what can be done to secure this world we've built?
Well, the research paper we're looking at doesn't just point out the problems, it also suggests some solutions, and it really boils down to a few key ideas. More physical surveillance on those critical routes, actually watching them. Building more cables in different places so we don't have all our eggs in one basket. Creating legally protected zones. And finally, getting much, much tougher on anyone who damages these cables, whether it's on purpose or by accident. And all of this leaves us with one final, pretty sobering thought. The next major global conflict might not look anything like the last one. It might be fought silently, deep beneath the waves, not with planes and tanks, but with submersibles hunting for the fragile glass threads that tie our entire civilization together. And the one question we really have to ask ourselves is, are we ready for that?